So again, welcome everybody to our monthly paleo meeting. We have a very, I think, interesting topic tonight, led by our own first Vice President, Katherine Howard, how to explore the incredible world of microfossils. And I want to thank you, Katherine, for doing this. Our paleo study group meetings are generally led by members, and so we are always looking for volunteers. If you're ever interested in presenting on something, please reach out to Katherine or somebody else on the board. Thanks again, Katherine, and the floor is yours.
All right, thank you. I'm so happy to be here and sharing something I've really become quite passionate about. Now, as far as paleontology in general, I'm a self-learner. And I still, when I open up concretions from Mason Creek, I see ink blots. But what I lack in knowledge, I more than make up for with curiosity, enthusiasm, patience, and time available to sort through matrix. So for as long as I can remember, like many here, I have picked up rocks and bones and other interesting stuff. And I have always dreamed of, now why won't it go forward, of digging up a dinosaur. But that hasn't happened yet. My passion for nature has included taking photos of insects and looking really closely at the natural world around me. And as I've taken these photos, I've shared these pictures online on Facebook with friends and have educated them about the insects or whatever I'm taking photos of. Meanwhile, I've also been picking up fossils and looking closely at them and learning more about them. And I've been sharing what I've learned with friends on Facebook. Now, there's a reason I keep mentioning that part, and you'll understand why in a few minutes. Then I started looking closer at fossils. And when I saw my first hash plate, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I started seeing some really small trilobites and aghast, just amazed. And again, I shared these with friends on Facebook. Then a couple of years back, a friend was in Galveston and she asked me if I wanted some sand from the different beaches she was going to. And I said, sure, why not? I'll look at sand. So what does sand look like under a microscope? Okay, I couldn't resist. That one was just too funny. But I started looking at the sand from Galveston. And it was actually kind of interesting. I was pretty surprised at what I saw. And I started to look closer and, there's some interesting things in here. And I was sharing photos of what I was finding. And the more I looked, the more I found. That little speck on the penny is actually what's called the sea butterfly. And it's perfect, but it is tiny, absolutely tiny. And I was sharing these photos on Facebook and people were as amazed as I was. Then sand started to pour in. People started asking, do I want some more sand? And I'm like, sure, this is interesting stuff. And I started getting sand from when people went on vacation or they knew somebody who lived by a beach, and more sand. And I'm looking at all of it and I'm starting to see some similarities and starting to understand some of the things I'm seeing in terminology. And it's fascinating. I just got absolutely fascinated. And more sand kept coming in. To date, I've probably received about 70 different samples of sand from around the world. And each one has something very unique and special about it. And so I was hooked, absolutely hooked. When I started looking at what I was finding and looking at it closer, and it's amazing what is right there beneath your feet. And most people don't think of sand as being interesting. Sand is very, very interesting. So, as I said, I was hooked. and I decided it's time to start looking for microfossils. What is a microfossil? Used to be that a microfossil had to be under 1 millimeter and you could only see it through a microscope. That's kind of changed because more and more people are starting to look. So microfossils are fossils that are small. There's no set size. There's no limitation and as far as what they are. It's something that's small. And I know that sounds kind of vague, but you'll see as we go on, there's a whole bunch of things that are just really small. So it's kind of changed over time. And the more people are looking, the more they're finding. Now, tonight, I'm going to talk to you about the tools I use, how I find what I've learned since I started looking at sand and microfossils. I'm going to go through the process, and then I'm going to show you a whole bunch of microfossils that I have found. Some of the tools I use, and we'll just go through them as we go. And this is my favorite. The picture is my typical setup. This is all I need to start looking at sand. Now, screening your matrix, I see people, that are out there, like on the Peace River or whatever, they're screening sand looking for shark teeth. And they're usually using like 10 holes per square inch. That so much is coming through. People have no idea what they're missing by letting all that come through. What I have found works really well are the skimmers that are used for when you're deep frying in a wok. They have really nice fine mesh, and they capture a lot. They let a lot of the dirt, the mud go through, but they capture your microfossils in it. So again, it depends on how small you want to go. And also the fish net. It's not fish netting. It is fish net that you use to scoop guppies out of a aquarium. I like the ones with the handles for the skimmers on the wok. Those are nice. And again, look for really small because otherwise your fine stuff is going to go right through those holes. So that's the first tool, is getting it down in size. Oops, where'd that go from? Whoa, hold on a second. We just bounced way ahead to the end. So I'm gonna bounce back real fast. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what I did. All right. Stop. This is insane. All right. So the next thing is magnifying lens. I found the best magnifying lens was on Amazon for $16.99. It is a pair of glasses with interchangeable lenses. The lenses go from 2.5 to 25x. I use the 10x 99% of the time. Sometimes I'll do an 8x and sometimes a 15. But the 10x really lets you get close without having it so close that you're inhaling, your microfossils. Again, $16.99 at Amazon, and it is lightweight, comfortable, and very versatile. Sorting dishes. Sorting dishes are really important. I have found that porcelain and ceramic work best. I avoid plastic. With plastics, you can build up some static. And the next thing you know, you go to get a microfossil and it's gone down into the rug, never to be seen again. So plastics, static is a problem. White works best. You want something with a shallow lip, not a deep lip, because otherwise you're going to have difficulty when you're trying to get in real close to find it. A strong light. I have a nice strong light. Daylight, not soft white, works best. You also want a dish that, since you're going to be holding it in your hand different ways, you don't want one that's too heavy because it's going to get you're going to get your hand tired. This is a really nice one that the size I like sometimes, but my go-to is this smaller one. Because I can hold it for as long as I need to. I can be looking at it close and it doesn't weigh down my hand and, cause any issues with that. So those are some of the dishes you want. You'll notice there's some egg trays. Those are great for sorting slightly larger fossils. I don't use them as often because then you have to figure out how to get them out of the center, scoops and move them out to get them into another dish, but they work. And it depends on what you're sorting and you'll find what you're most comfortable with. For me, it's these oblong dishes and it's definitely porcelain. Next thing you need is a pair of tweezers. Now I started off with the black set that you see on the right-hand side. And I got those at Menards, I believe, and they're precision tweezers. They're very nice tweezers, but you've got to use a lot of hand pressure, finger pressure on those. And because of that, you tend to get a little heavy-handed. And I've damaged a couple microfossils because they're kind of hard. And I was getting grooves in my hand because they weren't as comfortable to constantly hold all the time. So I started thinking, well, who uses tweezers all the time? Real detail tweezers. They use them for eyelashes. So I started looking into eyelash tweezers. Number one, they don't take a lot of hand pressure, finger pressure. They're very comfortable. They fit your hand better. And you don't need, their points are even more precise than the precision tweezers. So again, you think about how expensive are these, eyelash tweezers? You can buy a set for 6 or the 3 for under $10. I got mine on Amazon and under $10, and you can have an incredible set of tweezers. And I use them all the time. I love them. What's also helpful is a magnet. And I was really surprised by this, a lot of the grit matrix is magnetic, and it was hooking onto the tweezers, and then you couldn't grip anything, and I was constantly cleaning off the tweezers. So I now have a magnet that I run over, the matrix I'm sorting, and it picks all these magnetic pieces up, and then they don't get hooked on my tweezers. So a nice magnet. Again, not heavy duty equipment here. Brushes. I have to thank Renee Lauer for the suggestion of using a miniature paintbrush, a paintbrush for miniatures. Because when I was working with some of the forums, like the one from Japan here, they're so delicate that a pair of tweezers will break off the spines. And I was really struggling with how do I, or the tiny fossil will just get, the tweezers will catch it just right and it goes poof, off into the rug, never to be seen again. I probably have 100, maybe even more than 500 microfossils somewhere embedded in my carpet. But the brushes, some of these brushes have only like 5 or 6 bristles on them, and they'll catch these little fossils and then you can move them. So again, a set of detailed brushes under $10 on Amazon, and you get a full set. And they're designed to be used and held for, long periods of time with the painting. They're very comfortable. So these are the tools that I find really helpful. Storage. What are you going to do? How are you going to store them? Spice jars are great. I always keep a sample of the matrix enough in a spice jar. I label them. I have display boxes. You can see in the middle here, the display boxes. Those are great for like shark teeth and, a little larger on the microfossils. But if you look at that display box on the top, it doesn't look like there's much in there because the really small fossils, they get lost in that. And that takes up a lot of room. So I've discovered, what seems to work best for me are coin holders, like this one right here. You get a coin holder, and this one's about the size of a quarter. perfect to put a little label on it. You know, they make little round labels that are just the right size. You can get them up to the size of a $50. They're size-wise, they don't take up a lot of room. You can put a whole collection into a small little box, and it's great. You can also use bags. They have little jars. They've got a little acrylic jars with lids. So depending on how much or how big your microfossils are, you've got a lot of options. But these seem to be right up there with as far as size and storing. And what's really nice with the microfossils, when you open these up, you open up on the side and it has it's contained, so they don't roll off and they don't fall off. You know, because they've got a nice little lip on them, and they're really good. I love downsizing. I love, you know, instead of, because I use a lot of space with my other fossils, and now I don't take up as much space. So that's very nice. Microscopes. I like to show, take pictures of what I'm looking at. I started off with the simple microscope on the right-hand side. That's about $50 on Amazon. And that was nice. It was great when I was doing sand and starting out, but I found that I needed something a little more. It wasn't quite giving me exactly what I was looking for. So I invested in a nicer microscope. It was an investment, it was a little pricey, and then I got a camera that fits right into the top of the microscope. They're, you know, they come together like that. And that enabled me to take better photos of the microfossils I was finding. I'm still not there yet. I think that to do a decent photograph is going to take a lot of more training on my part, with either photo stacking and figuring, and you'll see, I'm going to talk about a little bit more in some of the photos, but it's really hard to capture the full details of a microfossil. The colors on them, they're, you know, unlike an insect where they're a little bigger and the brighter colors, then you've got that patterning. Some of these fossils are a little harder and it's a little more challenging. And to tilt them, I noticed with a lot of my shark teeth and denticles, it's really hard to get them to lay in at the right angle where you can capture all the subtle details that are useful in identification. So again, are you just looking for them, or are you looking to really photograph them and for your purposes? So that's where it comes in. This is the fun one, scale. If you look at this shark tooth in the middle there, it's a great picture. But the scale, the ruler, meaningless. It really is truly meaningless. And again, I'm not doing these for publication. I'm doing these for mine and for, you know, for more interest than, you know, scientific publication. But I want to show the scale, and I really struggled. A shark tooth on a pen, you know, fish tooth on a pen. Okay, that took a long time to do, get that balanced on there. And that was kind of cool. But again, I don't know how many people use straight pens anymore. And so that made it a real challenge to try to get people to understand how small. So I came up with using a piece of a Lego. I know it's not scientific, but I did measure the size of a Lego, you know, and the round top is 4.8 millimeters. You know, that helps. But a Lego piece is something that people can clearly identify with, and then it starts really sinking in just how small some of these fossils are. When you can fit 4 little teeth and there's so much room, or these 2 teeth, that's pretty impressive. But if you look down at this card down in the bottom left, that's what the fossil looks like. And it's the fossil in the little circle. Really? That doesn't help. I mean, so again, I'm not doing these for formal publication. I'm certainly not going to use a Lego piece, but to show scale, it seems to work really well. And if somebody has another suggestion, I'm always open to suggestions on that because scale's a tough one to show. Then there's the option of, well, what fits on a penny? Well, that's kind of fun. How many tiny little shells or teeth can you fit on a penny? Everybody knows the size of a penny. So again, that's something that people can comprehend, but that it's hard to really get small on a penny because some of these are so small and they get lost on the penny. So that's a fun way of doing it. So the process. Now, I want to say thank you to Chuck for sending me a tub of matrix to sort through. And so I decided, hey, I'm going to use this to show you the process. And we'll all see how that happens, what works out. What I start by doing is you wash your matrix. I highly recommend boiling water and a little bit of dish soap and pour the boiling water over the matrix. It really breaks up a lot of the mud and it loosens up the fossils. I stir with a wooden spoon. A metal spoon will collect a lot of that grit. You don't want it to collect at this point, so a wooden spoon works really well. And I stir it a lot. Then I start a rinse, and I may do the wash and rinse several times to get a lot of that really superfine mud that you don't want on there. So I do that. And my last overnight, boiling water with just a little bit of bleach. That takes care of any little stowaways that may be into that matrix. And I've had stowaways, and you don't want stowaways. So that's important. I leave it overnight, and then I do the rinse again. To dry the matrix, I find that, I mean, it sounds silly, but I use puppy training pads. They've got a plastic backing. They've got a very absorbent top. They're perfect for drying matrix. You just lay it out, spread it out, and it absorbs the moisture and they dry out much quicker. So when it's dried, then you start sorting it. I use the different size and I sort it down by sizes. Now I've got everything laid out. The big ones, they're easy. I go through those first and I usually go down in size. When I'm done, I then mix a couple of the sizes together with the real small ones, the other ones, because a lot of times if you're looking at the same size, you miss some things. So your eyes need that little break between looking at larger things mixed with smaller things. So I'll sort everything once and then I usually end up sorting it again one more time. Then what you find, I found a couple pieces of rocks and everything, some real nice little rocks, interesting stuff. But as far as fossils, in that whole tub of matrix, I found one fossil. Now, that's not always the case. It just so happens, you know, sometimes you really luck out and you find a whole bunch, and other times, not so much. But in the process can be so much of it, but it's really special when you find that one, and it's perfect, and it's gorgeous. So what do you do with your fossils once you found them? Well, the next step, identification. There are places that you can talk to club members for identification. There's books, publications. Google Scholar is a great option. Websites. Individuals have websites. There are group websites, museums, universities. Facebook groups. Don't laugh. Facebook groups are awesome. You can find a Facebook group for Texas fossils or one for microfossils or, you know, Cretaceous fossils. Facebook groups are a lot of individuals just like myself. We're interested, we're learning, we're showing pictures. These are pictures that they're not perfect. They're not in the book. They're, you know, what you actually find. And people are usually very helpful. And especially if it's the same area, they know what they're finding. So they've probably seen it before. So I highly recommend a lot of the Facebook groups because they're very helpful. I also go to businesses' websites that sell fossils. If they're selling a shark tooth, several shark teeth, they usually know what they're selling. And from looking at that, it kind of helps me compare and, oh yeah. And they call that a, and that gets me closer to what I'm looking at. So those are just some of it. I love books, but I struggle with looking at a picture in a book and trying to compare this absolutely perfect picture that's been taken professionally with what I'm looking at. It's a little more challenging because not all of mine are perfect. So this is my one weak area is identification. The only time you're going to see in this presentation where something is formally identified is right here. There's a couple reasons for that. One, I don't trust that that I've got it down to a species. A lot of these, I know generally what it is, but I haven't had them confirmed. So I don't want to embarrass myself by naming a species and then somebody to say, hey, that's actually not that one, it's something else. And I'm not quite there yet with my own skills. I'm getting the general area, but I can't even pronounce most of the fossils. So yeah, that's not my strong area. Finding them, yes. Sharing them, yeah. But identifying them, no. But these are two that have been confirmed by other people that that's what they really are. And it's pretty cool. And I can't begin to tell you how cool it was to find and I can't even hardly, Grogonites. These are algae, the fruiting female bodies of algae. And they are so small and so delicate. They're hollow, and picking these up with a tweezer, you're going to crush it. These are paintbrush pickup. And they're amazing, but they also roll. So if you're looking at a dish and you just move your dish just slightly, they're all rolling down that way, rolling down this way. And it was really tough to get that photo. I had to actually drill a little indent into the top of the Lego because otherwise they were just rolling off the Lego. Every time I breathed, they were rolling off. So I drilled a little hole at the top of the Lego in order to get them to stay on there so I could take a picture. Identification. Okay, here's a challenging one. Cretaceous foraminifera of Texas. You wouldn't think there would be that many, but this is one, these are 2 pages in a resource I found. And you look at them and you go, okay, those look like they'd be easy to identify. Then you start looking at the ones I found. Now, again, I'm trying to show you scale, how they are, measured wise, then on Lego, then some close-ups. And I'm looking at these and I'm going like, well, okay, I see some similarities. And then you go to the pages and you're like, ooh, yeah. Well, that one might be, uh, yeah, they're foraminifera. And that's because I find it very challenging. So, yeah, I'm not sure. I think, no. So that's why I'm not going to embarrass myself and say that's what this is because I'm not there yet. I got a long ways to go on that one. But there are resources out there. So I can kind of generally know the general area of some of these. Now I've been saying foraminifera. What are foraminifera? Well, these are really tiny little single cell organisms. They've been in the oceans for millions, hundreds of millions of years. Most of them are in a marine environment. They can either float through the ocean waters or they can be down towards the bottom dwelling or dwelling on shells or seaweed. There are over 50,000 forams that have been identified in history, but there's only about 4,000 left. And of those 4,000 that are living now in the oceans, there's only about 40 that float. And the rest are, bottom dwelling. So forms are really interesting because they're used to determine the dating of the environment where they're found. They're useful in understanding the climate and environment where the fossils were from. And, so they're using forams a lot in research. And they're fascinating, and they come in so many shapes. So we're going to go through a couple forams for foraminifera. These are my second favorite foraminifera, and they're in the same family category as the others. And you start looking at these, and they've been laying in the ground for millions and millions of years. And here I am, and I find them, and they're just beautiful. The shapes, the designs. And you can see how small they are in that top photo. And, the patterns, it amazes me. And these were filter feeders. So they're in the ocean and, you hooked on something and they're catching microscopic stuff, diatoms and everything else in the currents. Here's some other foraminifera. And again, you can start to see a whole variety. And these are the shells or the tests left over, Obviously, they were different. They had, other skin or, around them. So this is what's left in the fossil record. And there are more shapes and different patterns and everything. It's just fascinating. The more you look, the more you see. I thought some were just rocks, and I found out, no, those aren't rocks. Those are foraminifera. They're different ones. So here's another set of foraminifera. And first you say, oh, they're all real similar. Then you start looking at them closer and you start realizing, well, there's some differences there. There's actually quite a few different. Some of the ridges are different. Some of the, and it's confusing for me at first because I tend to look at color. And you really can't judge by color on a lot of these because that could be aging, it could be weathering. It doesn't necessarily mean that, the coloring matters. But then you start looking at the identification guides and you start going, oh, wow, there are a lot of different kinds. And then you go back and you start looking at, okay, so I thought these were all kind of similar. Now I'm realizing they're not. And it depends on how many ridges, how many shapes, the front top of them. And that's where I can kind of start getting a little overwhelmed because it's like, well, am I looking at a whole one or is it broken off? Because some of these, just one or two sections, that's the whole thing. So the identification, that's a real challenge, but it's fascinating. I'm totally fascinated. There's other types of foraminifera. These are amazing. The different variations and how the shells are formed, the patterns. I am always amazed when I look at these because there's some where you can see the clear chambers and others, they're smooth around the top. You can't see the chambers. And the more I look at them, the more interesting and the more variety. And it's like, okay, I'm definitely seeing different species. And some are so thin and others are, they almost look like an overstuffed hamburger. They're just, so they're really interesting. And, finding them, that's pretty easy. Photographing them so you guys can really see that detail, I'm still working on that. Beyond foraminifera, you start seeing some other things. Oh, hey, I know what that is. I know what that is. But then you start looking at it closer and you're like, oh, there's some variations, there's some differences. And I love the ones at the top left. I think those are just amazing. Can I tell you what they are? No. If somebody out there recognizes what some of these things are, yeah, tell me, send me a note, let me know when because I'm still working on my foraminifera, trying to get those identified myself. Again, the variations, it's amazing. Nature is amazing. The one in the center top right here, this is actually almost, whoops, totally round. And it took a while to get it to balance, but it's almost totally round. So very, very cool. Then you get into some different shapes, and there are amazing shapes out there. I'm always seeing something new. Every time I look, I find something new. And you start looking at it a little closer and cleaning it up, and you're like, whoa, there's like lots of detail in some of these. And they're so tiny. Yeah. I mean, I hope you guys are looking at this going like, wow, because I still go, wow, all the time. Here's some other ones. Now, everybody's saying, oh, crinoids. Yeah, crinoids. Most crinoids you see are like this big. These are so tiny. I mean, that's on the head of a Lego. And when you look at them that small and that close, you start to see a lot more detail and more interesting. But yeah, crinoids are really cool when you get small. And most people, they would miss these because these are your little sand grains. And people are looking for the bigger crinoids that you can see with with your naked eye. And they're missing all these really tiny ones that are equally amazing. Pieces of crinoids. These are all, not all of them, but most of these are parts of crinoids. And it took me forever to figure out what they were because, when you think of crinoids, you get this image and the books show these things. And then there's all these other things. And I'm like, I don't know what these are. And because they're so small, they don't resemble the larger pieces. And some of the shells and everything else, just, wow, really cool stuff. There's other shapes. I mean, every time you look, you can see different shapes. I haven't quite identified everything yet. I mean, obviously the two on the bottom are shells, and a lot of times you can see shells that have obviously had a predator go after them. Other times they're perfect. They might as well have been found on the beach yesterday, and they're beautiful. But again, it's now I don't know what that is. I'm not sure. And trying to figure out where to look. For example, this one down here in the middle, bottom middle. Where do you start looking to figure out what that is? Because it's actually rounded. That's where the going down the rabbit hole, trying to figure out what these are. And it's a challenge. So when you get into shells, we're talking tiny little shells. And some of these are still whole. They have the front and the back. And that's so cool. I mean, obviously they're too small to even think about going inside and looking inside and see if there's anything inside. But it's pretty cool when you see how small they are and how perfect they are. They're not chipped or broken. I haven't figured out how to clean them yet because it's not like you can hold them in your hand and brush. I mean, and you can't use vinegar or anything like that because you're going to destroy the shell. So I haven't figured out how to clean them up a little more. I'm not sure, one paintbrush bristle at a time. I don't know. I'm not there yet, but it is tiny and they're beautiful. It's so cool. Then you get into fish. Now, here we get some exciting stuff because, wow, fish. The smaller the tooth, the more the root. I truly see that in a lot of the small teeth. They've got the roots, both cusps. They seem to be in really good shape. So I'm going to show you some of these. I know some of them general. I don't know what all of them are. I'm not even sure if they're, some of them, I'm not even sure if they're a tooth or a dermal denticle. But they're fascinating. And just when I think I have found the smallest possible tooth, I find one even smaller. So here is a couple, and they're just, I mean, look at the roots on some of these. And then look at the one on the top right, how tiny that is. Wow. It's very, very cool. So I have a lot of fun finding them. It's a challenge again to take the photos, to get it just right, to try to get scale involved. And identification, because like most, even the big ones, where they fit on the jaw, they change. And when you're talking about, 40, 60 teeth on a jawbone, and each one's slightly different, it's overwhelming. I'm getting better at some, like the top one, that's from a sawfish. Do I know which sawfish? No. But I'm getting a little better. There's some more. And again, they're so different, and yet there's similarities, and it's like, wow. And these are tiny. The ones where you don't see any of the curve on the Lego piece, that's because they're so small, they're in the center of a Lego piece. But I just happened to be able to get close enough. And the teeth are a little easier to photograph because they have a little more definition for the camera to focus in on. But it's real interesting when and they're tiny. Then you get into some other teeth, the drumfish teeth at the top and the jaw bones, and it's like, well, is it a fish jawbone, or is it maybe an amphibian or a reptile? I don't know. Honestly, I'm trying to find that little teeny tiny fossil in a comparison, in a reference. That's hard. I don't have that skill yet. I'm trying, but I don't have that skill yet. I just see them and just, wow. And that's what I want to show tonight. It's not what, but what is out there and what people are missing right underneath and mixed in with the dirt around the gastropod they found. Some more jaws. Or are they scales? Spines. I think these are, for the most part, jaw bones, but what kind? I don't know. They're pretty darn interesting. So that's what I'm finding. That's what I'm going to share. Again, is how to find them and what you can find. The mouth plates, they come in all shapes, all sizes. Some look like brick walls. Some look like cobblestone. And some of them are they're just small pieces of them, but you can identify what they are. And then trying to figure out, yeah, I'm not so sure on some of these. Others are a little easier, oh, that's a classic, and you can figure that out. So it's real interesting. You get into some of the teeth, again, the difference in the teeth, and I found myself going like, okay, are they different species because of coloration and shape, or is it different ages, or where do you draw what's the distinguishing aspect? And I'm not there yet because I don't know. I mean, are the ones that are just orange and white the same species as the ones that are black, orange, and white, or just orange and black, or, I don't know. And they're tiny. These are tiny, tiny teeth. For example, I'm not going to make you unmute and guess, but would you believe there are almost 500 teeth on each penny? I counted them. I don't remember now right off the top of my head, but I counted them. And there's some are kind of hidden, but there's a lot of tiny little teeth. And I can see differences and I can see similarities based on sometimes shape, sometimes color. But to try to figure out, am I looking at the same species or am I looking at completely different species? I don't know yet, but I hope to figure that out someday. Some more teeth, the one to show you, assortment. Look at the one down at the very bottom. Look at how tiny that is. I mean, it is so tiny. And that's still not my smallest tooth I found. So, and you can see it's complete. You got the root, the cusps, everything. It's complete. Not the clearest photo, I'll admit. I'm still working on getting, more detailed, but yeah. And people are missing this. They're looking for that big old mag tooth, and it's like, dude, you're missing all of these. Trying to show the different shapes and trying to capture all of that. Tried to use like on the side on the left, that's a molding clay to try to show how it looks because they don't always lay flat. And then the other side, that's some sticky tape, trying to get it to lay so I could get some to lay on one side, some to lay on another side. And that's really fun trying to figure out to do that and to get it, with the little tweezers and just like, okay, stay in that position right there. That's a challenge. So yeah, I've gotten inventive with trying to figure out how to get them to lay so that people can see the variety or the total shape. And this is a bad focus because a dime is not a good example because it pulls the color and you don't get the same. So some of these pictures are in here just to show you what doesn't work. A dime does not work. I've not been able to get a good, decent using a dime because the silver, the light try to get this doesn't work very well. A dime on this one, totally lose what you're trying to see. So a lot of that is just trial and error and trying to figure out and going like, okay, I see something really cool here, but boy, a dime isn't going to work. And so there's some mistakes and it's okay to have them. That's how we learn. So here's some familiar to some and maybe unfamiliar to others: skate teeth and dermal denticles. It took me a long time to figure that out. The bottom was a dermal denticle because I'm looking at that going like, and the only thing I could find initially that looked like that kind of, and this was early on, was a frog tooth. And I'm like, well, I don't think there were frog teeth at this time frame and all that. But it was something I followed for a little while because I couldn't figure out what it was. Now I know what it is. So when I see them, it's like, oh yeah, it's a dermal denticle. I don't know what species it's from. I found out that a shark and rays and all that, they have different dermal denticles on different parts of their bodies for different purposes. And so, yeah, I haven't got there yet. Somebody else may look at that and go, oh, that's from this species. I'm not there yet. And I don't know that person that knows what these are yet. But it is amazing. These are tiny, tiny things that most people would miss. If you're not looking closely, you're not going to see these. And that's what I want to convey to a lot of people is start looking really close because it is amazing what you can find, what's out there. You gotta look close, but boy, oh boy, in a cup of sand, you can find a world of microfossils. Some more, just to again to show you how tiny they are with the Lego, and then what what you can find in there. I don't know if the one on the penny is a claw or a tooth. I have found things that I'm not quite sure, because they could go either way, and so I'm not sure if I'm putting claws in with teeth or teeth in with claws. I'm not, because trying to figure that out, that's where I really struggle with. And there are things that you wouldn't think are what they are because they're so different. Look at this dermal denticle on this side, and then look at this dermal denticle here. Huh, very different. So it is something I am still learning. If I could just stop looking long enough to really start figuring out, but I love the looking part. I find that if I'm listening to an audiobook while I'm sorting, my eyes are focused, my ears are focused, and hours just pass by in a blink because your brain, it's almost a form of meditation. So yeah, listening to audiobooks while I'm sorting through, it's fun. It's not boring at all. It's a blast. So then we come into looking at, and it's again, penny is not a great thing when you're trying to get focused, but I wanted to show a little variety here. And I circled 3 pieces. There's actually more in this picture, but I only circled 3. And you're like, that's interesting. Well, here's the close-up. Again, not the greatest focus because I'm still working on focusing and, and all that. But what sharks and fish eat, they poop. And these are very tiny, microscopic little turds. And you think fish turds, but if you really look at them, you see a lot of different colors. You see patterns in them, and they're really interesting. I haven't figured out how to photograph them really close up and really cool, but in some of the larger ones, and I'll show you a couple in a few minutes, you can see pieces of shells in them, and you can start to kind of figure out what they're eating, especially with the marine ones, when they're eating shells and on other things. You can see that a little bit. Here's some different samples of poop. Yeah, and I like calling it poop. I know it could be turds, and I know there's a better name for it, but I think it's more fun to just say poop. So you can see the different shapes, the different textures, and there are people that study the fossilized remains and figure out what they're from. Now, I have looked at a lot of them, and thanks to Chris, I just ordered a book on fossil poop. But it is very, very interesting and trying to figure out who might have left it. I'm not there yet, but it's a rabbit hole to go down. Then there's some unknowns. Now, I have, since I started this, I know the bottom left is most likely a tooth from one of the drumfish or similar species. But the bones, I'm not so sure, because we're talking, they're not fish bones. They're tiny. They were found with other Cretaceous fossils, grit. I don't know what kind of bones they are, and these are just a couple of them. They're very tiny, and I haven't figured out what they could possibly, because they're not fish bones. I don't know if haven't figured out if they're amphibian or reptile, but we're talking a marine environment. I don't know. Same with I'm assuming those are teeth, but are they? I don't know. They look kind of like teeth, but they don't match anything that I have been able to find so far on my own. So if anybody sees those and says, hey, and again, I understand that matrix can be a mix of different ages because a lot of it's coming into the river or on a beach or something like that. So it makes it a little tough, but if anybody knows what these possibly could be as far as suggestions, I am open. I am open. I'll go down that rabbit hole looking because I'm still trying to figure out what these possibly are. So then we get to the holy grail of microfossils, the conodonts. And for the longest time, I couldn't comprehend conodont. How big, how small, what's it really look like? Because most of the pictures you see, they're on a pinhead or, I mean, I couldn't capture it. Then I found some. And then I found some more. And it's like, I get it now. So, and they're cold because these are worms. These are worms that had, these jaw plates and bones around, they crush their thing. But these are worms. So I'm just like, cool. I have my conodont. And I'm very pleased. I'm very, very pleased. So now, remember at the beginning, I talked about dreaming of digging for a dinosaur? I recently found out that I've actually kind of, in an odd way, almost got there. Let me explain. When I started preparing for this, somebody sent me an article. So happens that a former or a current ESCONI member got me as close as I probably will ever get to a dinosaur dig. How she did it. When Sue, the dinosaur, T-Rex, was discovered, and they bundled her up and took her bones to the Field Museum, her bones were in dirt. They scraped all this dirt off, put it in boxes, and it got put away in some closet at the Field Museum. 20 years later, a volunteer, former ESCONI member, Karen Norquist, said, hey, I want to help look through this for microfossils. So she started looking through the dirt that had been wrapped around Sue. Now, Sue is a T-Rex, a terrestrial dinosaur. Sue was never in the ocean. Sue never met a shark in her life, most likely. Had nothing to do with the ocean. In the dirt, embedded around Sue's bones, were shark teeth. Tiny, 1 millimeter shark teeth. Tiny shark teeth, like what I've been finding. So Sue the dinosaur is similar to died on an ancient, dried up ocean bed with shark fossils, teeth. So I've actually, with these shark teeth, especially the ones from the Cretaceous, I've actually come close to digging my own dinosaur, closest I'm probably ever going to get. So I think that's a pretty cool tie-in. And I found myself thinking about this a lot, you know?
Hey,
Who would have thought?
hey, Catherine,
Yes.
just to clear it up a little bit, Sue was
Mhm.
in a river deposit, and the shark that you're talking about was actually a freshwater shark. What?
I read other research on it that they're not quite sure on that.
No, she
So,
was in a sandbar in a river. At least
okay.
the old museum's
Well,
message.
it still is shark tooth
It is a
in the
shark.
dirt. So I want to thank some of the many people, and this is just a handful of people that have helped make this presentation, help feed my addiction and support it. Thank you all so very, very much. Keep sending me stuff. I love looking through this stuff. if you want me to look through stuff for you, send it to me and I'll send it back. I enjoy doing it. I like finding what I'm finding. So, questions?
So I have a question. So when you showed like those pennies and you showed like that 500
Hmm.
teeth on it, are those all from like one batch of sand? Like is
Um,
it that fossiliferous?
yes, because I try not to mix up.
Sure,
I try not to mix, so and that's been, trying to be careful and make sure I label. When I label, my shark teeth and my fossils, I put little labels on them and I don't mix the matrix because
sure.
they're different. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
So those were all from um a larger amount of matrix, probably like maybe half a shoebox full.
Okay, sure. So you only found one in that one batch, but sometimes you find
Oh
all.
yeah, sometimes I can find, I mean, it's because sand and gravel, very little of it is actually rock.
Hmm,
Most of it is a lot of biological material. And so when you start looking closer, I mean, it's like I'm pulling out every other piece is something. So I'm finding a lot of stuff. The closer I look, the more I find.
yeah, interesting. Just fascinating. How long have you been doing this for now?
With the sand, starting with the sand, it's probably been about 3 years,
Okay, sure. Yeah.
you know. Yeah, she sent me the sand and I started, I was hooked. And then it just like, whew, and I spent a lot of time. It could be maybe a few more years than that. But,
Yeah,
with the fossils have probably been maybe 2 years. So
okay.
the sand's got to be probably about 3, 4 years now.
I could tell you've been doing it for some time because of the learning that you've done. Like the static electricity comment you made, I never would have thought of that. Like I would have
Oh,
had stuff flying all over, and then I would have learned like you did, I suppose, you know.
oh, the worst is sneezing.
Ah.
Everything goes everywhere. Or a cat jumping up and a cat's fluffy tail. And
Oh,
it's like, no,
oh.
no, you know. So yeah, I've had that. And I've had where, you know, a sudden sneeze hits me and it's just like,
Hmm.
it is really frustrating. Or going to pick up the perfect one. I think I have it and
Oh.
it's gone, you know.
So what do you do
Um,
when you sneeze? Do you look away? Do you look up?
well,
Do you
and
cover with a
sometimes I look away. Sometimes I actually almost implode because I'll hold it in, you
yeah.
know. Um, sometimes I'll wear a mask, but after a while,
Yeah,
it's like,
hard.
but even breathing, I mean, I know I've breathed in a couple at one point or I've snorted a microphone.
That'll be the next month's
Yeah,
paleo snorting microfossils. It's a little different.
but it is, some of them have been like, oh, the most exquisite thing. And we're trying to take a picture and then breathe and it falls off and it falls off and it falls off.
Instead of
And
coal
trying,
mine, wonder what you would call that disease.
Mhm.
Instead of coal miner's lung, I wonder what you would
Yeah,
call.
right.
Yeah, no,
Be getting
I'm pretty
stoned.
good. I don't do it too often anymore. I'm pretty good, but yeah, there are some hazards with the really small ones because it doesn't take much before you can lose them.
Yeah. It's amazing to me how detailed so many of the things you find are, and what a variety you have found. I hope you come back like in another 2 years when you've identified some more things and learned some more things and do this again because I bet in 2 years you'll know even so much more than you do now.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's what's really hard is like, do I stop looking and finding and go into identification? I really like it because that's a lot harder, and you can't listen to audiobooks as much.
Yeah, right, right.
But it does take a whole different mindset
Yeah.
to start going down the rabbit hole and trying to figure even knowing where to start. I would never have thought algae.
Yeah, right.
I never would have found that on my own, that those were algae.
Right.
So some of it is really hard figuring out even where to start.
Mm.
Not, more and more people are looking, but not not as much as I would have hoped. And trying to find trying to understand some of the differences too is a real challenge, because I'm not trained, and I don't, and some of the descriptions are so formal that I'm sitting there trying to figure out, what does that word even mean?
Right.
And I'm learning, but it's a definite challenge for me.
I do have a suggestion for you, Catherine, pertaining to trying to take a photo of something at an angle. I would suggest I was going to suggest possibly getting your block wet, then getting your little fossil wet, putting it on the block, and letting it dry. And I think the drying might hold it in place a little bit.
I've tried that. I've used spit too. Just
I'm talking letting it dry all the way.
Oh, I have, and that's how I've been able to get some. But it's really hard because you lose your focus, because these are so small, and your field depth is so small that and that's why I was trying with the modeling clay to get it to where I could kind of get it positioned right. But yeah, and since my camera is focused on the top of the microscope, you really can't maneuver it. So I've tried to maneuver the fossils, but that gets really challenging to try to get it in the right position to where it works. And I've tried with different lighting. And I probably need to just spend more time and more practice.
Did you try maneuvering blocks and stuff under the blocks?
Oh yeah. Trust me, I've tried a lot of different things. I've gotten real creative, and some of them have been like, okay, then, because some of them they just roll off, but I've tried different things, and and I'm getting better, but there's others that I think it's a lot of the equipment. It's just not quite the right equipment to capture some of these fossils the right way. So yeah, that's been a challenge.
I noticed that some of your pictures, they look almost like they're wet, like the fish poop. Was that wet, or was that just that natural polish?
That's just the natural polish, and it's also sometimes the lighting, just the way the lighting is under the microscope. But no, they're not wet. There's only been I think there's only one in there that's wet, and that's because I was trying to get it angled right, and I had spit on it to get it to, stick.
Okay.
But no, they're naturally that polished.
I was wondering about scale. The Lego blocks, that's a really cute little touch. But what if you use like human hair or cat hair?
Well, I've looked at some of the body parts through the microscope, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend that all the time. It's just kind of weird.
Not other body parts.
Hair's not, but to me, hair doesn't
most hair is
show
like
it.
50 to 80 microns, and people have a good feel for how thick a human hair is.
Yeah. Well, and I'm always pulling hair out, because the cats are always.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe I should try hair.
So I thought you could make like a little Y bone and glue a hair across, and you could just lay it down like a little, what they call little Jew harps.
Yeah, I'll try hair. I hadn't really thought. I mean, hair to me is just annoying. I'm constantly, trying to get the little pieces of fuzz and hair out. but I haven't thought of using it as a tool. It might work.
And also for cleaning, have you tried an ultrasonic cleaner?
You want to buy me one?
Well, you can get them at Harbor Freight, for like $30, $40. I have a
No,
few.
I haven't. I haven't tried it. I wouldn't even know any, I mean, I'll write it. I don't know anything about it.
Would that be
So,
gentle enough or?
Yeah, I would just use water, maybe soapy water.
Okay.
yeah, and that's what I do. I think some of it is, you know, because it's so small and it's in the, like in the shells.
Yeah.
They're so small, and in that crevice, I mean, even you know, you take one of these, a pick, and these are just huge, you know.
Yeah. You'd probably modify it. You get these little ultrasonic cleaners for like jewelry. They're about that big. I would recommend putting your fossils in a little baggie, like a little dime baggie, and zip it shut with, with water in there. That way it doesn't get lost in the bottom of that big pan. Even though the pan's only like a pint size or a quart size, your little fossils will be forever lost. You don't have to worry
Yeah.
about dumping it down the drain.
I'll look into it. Thank you.
I do have some ultrasonic cleaners. Sometime I could see I could try that experiment. But Harbor Freight has them fairly cheap.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I know
And
if you had fossiliferous area matrix around where you got that, is that always a sign that you're going to have more fossils in that? Like, for instance, the beach sand that you've been getting, was that stuff that they collected and made sure it had some fossils in it, or is it
No.
pretty much okay? I just kind of
Most people just get a Ziploc sandwich bag and they scoop a bunch of sand in it and send it to me. And what do you find in there? And it's really hard because, I mean, you don't know where the sand is necessarily from. Some of the beautiful beaches that people have sent me sand from, it's all pulverized quartz. It's dead, it's sterile, there's nothing in it. And it's so boring. And it's like, how do I keep that excitement by the most boring sand in the world? And then you get other sand like Hawaii, and it's all shells, it's fascinating. Hawaii sand is just amazing. I will say I've been really surprised with all the sand that I've received from everywhere. Very little of it is dirty. I'm not finding lots of microplastics, which I really was kind of thinking I was going to find. Very little. And this is, there's some dubious hairs in some of the more popular sand beaches. But and that's why I always clean everything first. But I'm not finding a lot of microplastics in the sand. Some sand, Galveston sand, you can tell it's close to petroleum products. It stinks. It really stinks, but other sand, no. It's beautiful,
Catherine, I remember seeing some teeth that looked like it had 3 roots.
Yeah, the teeth it does have 3, and there was no way to really show it where.
Do you know what time period they're from?
Hmm?
Do you know what time period?
I still
Cretaceous,
didn't catch.
Jurassic? What
Oh,
time period?
Cretaceous.
Look up mammal teeth. I might be
But
right, might be wrong. It could be mammal teeth.
But these are tiny. These are microscopic.
They can be very small. Think of a salamander or something salamander size. There
Okay.
could be small baby animals, mammals.
At
Just
that
something to
time,
think about.
it was very, very small.
Someone asked a question about the Australian sand. he sent me, the sand did not have a fossil in it, but it did have a small gecko-like lizard egg in it. It had hatched, but I was able to identify it was a lizard-like egg. And there were tektites from meteorite, and I believe those were around 600,000 years old, tektites.
Wow, okay. Thank you.
But yeah, so that was really cool, the sand.
You've mentioned in the past that some people had to smuggle sand to you.
Yeah,
What are the
some people,
restrictions on
there
shipping sand?
there are some rules where you're not supposed to collect sand from the beaches. So people have been really creative. They have had sand in their shoes, and they put their shoes with sand in their shoes into a Ziploc bag and put it in their suitcase, because nobody's gonna sit there and question they have sand in their shoes. When the person sent me sand from Hawaii, he made sure that he followed all the local traditions of what to include with the sand, so I wouldn't be cursed and he wouldn't be cursed. So that was fun. Another person realized they hadn't got the sand, so they sent their boyfriend out at midnight to run down to the beach and scoop up some sand and bring it back. So there have been some fun stories.
No sand art.
Hmm?
No sand art. You know, those jars with seagulls. flying.
No, I keep it real simple with that. That it is really interesting to see the differences as well as some of the similarities. I mean, for a while there, when I was looking, really focusing on the sand and separating things out into colors, you can start to see some, you can almost figure out where the sand was coming from or what kind of wave action, because of the polish, because of the size. And then even exploring, like a friend went to Greece and on it, with the big group, and they all went to different islands. So she said, please bring me back sand from each island you go to. So then I had 5 samples from different islands, and they didn't look at all the same at all alike. One was pumice, and I started doing research on the geography around these islands because I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't be the same. I mean, they're all Greek islands. Why wouldn't they all be very similar? And it's because the one sand is actually, the beaches were all created from a tidal wave thousands of years ago, inundated that area, and that's why the sand is very different there. So it's real fascinating what I learned just in the areas, doing research on, so I could try to identify the type of rocks.
Do you have any
Well,
bucket list?
Catherine, you know that all of the Hawaiian sand is brought in because they don't have anything but basalt, and they had trepidations about having a black sand beach. So I don't know if they dredge it up or what they do, but to get the white sand, that people like, and oh yeah, nice beach. Well,
See, the sand that was collected from me was from remote beaches, so it wasn't the pulverized quartz. But yeah,
oh, okay.
the sand, you don't want any sand around Miami Beach because it is pulverized quartz. They bring it in. Same with some of the other beaches. Yeah, Rio de Janeiro, no, it's all pulverized, and these were sterile. So, and that's why a lot of them say you can't take the sand because they pay for it to be brought in. But
Yeah.
if they go to the remote beaches, you don't find a single bit of quartz in it at all. On the Hawaiian beaches, the remote ones, there's no quartz. There's a few little bit of lava and ovaltine, but it's all natural, which is really cool.
Yeah, the beaches in Galveston, they aren't imported, but they're dredged from the area, you know, they're dredged and blown onto the beach or whatever. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even Galveston beaches, depending on where they are and the tide line and everything else, very different. They're so different depending on where they are. And I've had sand from St. George Island, one on one side and one on the other side, and it's different because the wave pattern is different. It's really interesting when you start looking at the area where that sand is collected from. And it also varies between whether it's collected from where everybody's sitting or at the high water mark or down in the water. And I've told people, don't collect it from the water because you're gonna get something that's probably living down there. And I don't want, you know, do it from the high water mark only, not from the water.
So what do you expect to see in the one that the sand I've got from Siesta Key? Do you know, or do you have sand from there?
I'm expecting to see a lot of foraminifera in there,
Okay.
a lot of coral, probably well-weathered coral, but mostly a lot of foraminifera and very small shells, probably pieces of shells as well as very, very tiny, perfect shells. I expect to see some green ovalite, I believe it's called, because that tends to be popular in, you know, the sand from Hawaii naturally. So I expect to see some of that.
Well, this
very-
isn't Hawaii, this is Florida.
Hmm?
This is Florida, not.
Oh, I thought you said Waikiki.
No, I said from Siesta Key.
Oh,
I just looked for you.
I would still expect to see foraminifera, also small shells, some quartz. Depends.
Have you looked at,
Maybe a shark tooth or two.
have you looked at any like, shales, like the Waldron shale?
I've got some shell from You Dig It in Utah. And I, you know, so that all that is some small trilobites, which is really cool. But you're not going to see anything else other than trilobites in it.
Yeah, because I was thinking
But I haven't
Waldron
looked at,
shale from
no,
St.
I
Paul.
haven't had a chance to look at because I haven't collected any of that too much. So I'm, you know,
Didn't you pick up some of the stuff from the Napoleon quarry?
I did get some from Napoleon, and I have not gone through the Napoleon as well as I went through some of it generally, but then I got distracted and I haven't gone back to it. So I still need to go through my Napoleon. And then Chuck gave me a little bit from Napoleon as well. So I have Napoleon. Napoleon, depending on where it's collected, can be very different. Some of it that I did go through, it's so much of the grit that doesn't, there's nothing in it. It's just, but other pieces there's some interesting things in it. I just haven't gone through it as detailed as I want to yet. I'm kind of behind with what everybody has sent me. I haven't caught up yet because I keep getting distracted by the new stuff.
I was kind of wondering about that too. It seems like most of what you've done has been like ocean beaches. How much have people sent you from like rivers and lakes and things like that? How much of that have you checked?
Quite a few of the fossils are from, you know, land, you know, river beds and all that. Only most of the beach stuff was early on, and I don't, any of the stuff that you see after I made the distinction of microfossils, anything before that is from sand from different beaches. The stuff after that it's all from Cretaceous and other areas where it is fossil and not beach.
Gotcha.
So a lot of those at the end, you know, once I switched over in the presentation to microfossils, those are all fossils from collected from land.
Cool.
other questions?
We can talk about other stuff too.
Yeah, maybe I'll stop the recording, but if there's more questions about microfossils, certainly we can ask them. And if there's anything else we want to talk about, for sure.